It was easier to order someone around if they were younger than you. I've come for more than just greetings today. I'm also here to offer my apologies, Hyolan said. What for? My nephew injured the master physician and I am deeply sorry for that. He is still young and as my father's first grandchild he has been rather spoiled. I will accept any punishment on his behalf. Please look generously upon my nephew. Who the heck is this guy? He sure didn't seem like Jaya-Kuo's child. He had the deferential attitude of someone who had already spent decades as a buffer between a superior and their subordinates. Hyolan was kind enough to bring snacks and wine, and it's so hard to get snacks these days. I can't thank him enough, the quack doctor said. He held up a basket of steamed buns. There were 2 bottles of wine beside it. Well now, this is special grape wine from the western capital, although I fear I don't know whether it will be to your taste. In hopes of finding something you would enjoy, I brought 2 varieties, one more alcoholic and one less. What an excellent choice of gift. Maomao felt an urge to cling to the wine bottles but resisted. Now then, if you'll excuse me, I must get back to work, Hyolan said. Oh, please stay a moment longer, Hyolan. You are still young and youth should take its time to relax, said the quack, who by now had adopted an air of total informality with the young man. I'm afraid I couldn't. My uncles and aunts told me to make sure I studied diligently at the foot of the Moon Prince. I will work as hard as I can to catch up to everyone else, and meanwhile I do hope you'll look favourably on me. Hyolan gave another elaborate bow and left the office. I have to say I don't see any wolf in him, Maomao remarked. The tiger and the wolf of Hyolan's name suggested someone greedy and violent. It was a strong name, yes, but not a very good one. Yeah. He seems more like a loyal mutt, Lehaku added, and Maomao agreed with him completely. After Hyolan had left, the quack told them about Jaya-Kuo's children. They say Master Jaya-Kuo had 4 children. Young Hyolan is the youngest of them. Maomao and the others quickly turned Hyolan's gift of steamed buns into their snack. She had to make sure there was nothing in them, Maomao thought. Her old habit of checking food for poison reared its head. They were filled with meat and she was perfectly happy to make them her lunch. She was only sorry she couldn't have the wine with them, but she was on duty after all. The oldest is 25 and then the rest of the children were born in successive years. Except Hyolan, he is a little younger, about 18. Isn't that right, Miss Chu? The quack asked as he poured tea into some cups. Oh yes, very right. Master Jaya-Kuo's children are in this order: eldest son, eldest daughter, second son, and then the third son who is 18 years old. Chu was putting out some soup she had reheated. Maomao took a bowl and passed it to Lehaku, who stood slightly apart from the quack doctor. The quack prepared the tea without getting up, and Lehaku was as vigilant as ever. After spending more than 6 months in each other's company, each knew their role. That is an odd collection. Do they perchance have different mothers? Maomao asked, sitting in a chair and breaking open a bun. The filling spilled out meat, mushrooms, and bamboo shoots. Not at all. Unlike his father, Master Jaya-Kuo only had 1 wife. Huh. That is quite different from Master Jaya-Kuan, the quack said, sounding surprised. It wasn't unusual for men in Li to have more than 1 wife, but 11 was enough to make Jaya-Kuan the subject of talk. Even the emperor only had enough wives to count on one hand. Yes, there were 2,000 consorts and ladies in the rear palace, but considering family background and resources, they weren't necessarily all people His Majesty could easily take to bed. Lehaku spoke up. You know, I heard a rumor about Master Jaya-Kuo's wife. His ears and mouth were participating in the conversation, but his eyes continued to scan the area outside the medical office. What kind of rumor? Maomao, having carefully studied the bun, now popped it into her mouth. The seasonings were characteristic of the central region, and she was surprised to realize it made her a little bit homesick. I heard she's always had good business sense. She used to be a real go-getter. After the birth of their second son, she boarded a foreign trading vessel for a business venture. Unfortunately, it was involved in a shipwreck. Things weren't very good in the country where she wound up, so she had to stay there for several years. That's quite a story. I'd expect to see more of someone like that, though, said Maomao. So far, she hadn't seen Jaya-Kuo's wife even once. She'd assumed that meant she was just a chaste, retiring woman who spent her time supporting her husband, but it seemed strange that Maomao hadn't so much as seen her face since Jaya-Kuo's death. Chu picked up the story. She returned years later, but people said she wasn't the same woman. She had become someone who supported her husband from the shadows, away from everyone's view. A lot must have happened to her in those farmlands. When Maomao looked closely, she noticed Chu's plate and her own each had 1 extra bun. She would need to be careful. Do you think that explained why Master Jyaku disliked foreigners so much? Maomao asked. Who can say for sure? We will likely never know now. Chu didn't seem very interested, happily eating a steamed bun. Lihaku had also returned to his food, apparently having shared everything he knew about the wife. Maomao didn't have any further questions. You know, wasn't the girl you examined Master Jyakuo's granddaughter? The quack asked. That is correct. She was his oldest daughter's daughter. The girl had developed an intestinal blockage from eating her own hair. Tianyu had performed the surgery, but Maomao had cared for her afterward. The stitches had already come out cleanly. It must have hurt so much having her stomach cut open. How is the wound? Is it all right now? The quack asked, his brow furrowed in genuine concern. You can hardly even tell it was there, Maomao thought. She hated to admit it, but Tianyu was an excellent surgeon. Maybe you had to be a little crazy to be so good. Heaven, the saying went, did not give two gifts to one person. Yes, it's much better, Maomao said. I visit her periodically to check on the progress of the scar, but that's all. In fact, I'm going tomorrow. Treatment was coming along nicely. She wished a certain abdomen-scorching noble would be such a good patient. Oh, that's good, I'm glad to hear it. The quack looked relieved. Maomao, though, thought he should worry more about his own leg. Chapter 4. The Sheltered Wife. The next day, Maomao went to see Jyakuo's granddaughter, just as she told the quack doctor she would. What was her name again? Maomao, as we've established, was not excellent at remembering people's names. But she got by okay, so it was fine, right? As so often, Lihaku and Chu were with her, and one more person. Oh, please don't mind me. For some reason, Jyakuo's third son, Hulan, was there too. I just thought I might tag along. I like to see my elder sister and my niece once in a while. Gee, and here I thought your honor was serving the Moon Prince. Are you sure you don't need to work? She asked, careful not to let her skepticism show on her face. You needn't worry, this doubles as work. I thought it would be a good chance to ask for some details about the job my father was doing. You're going to have a chat with your sister. That didn't sound like work to Maomao. She gave him a quizzical look. No, my mother. She lives with my sister. She says there's too much commotion at the main house for her. Ah, the much-discussed mother. So she retired from the main stage but was still supporting Jyakuo in the background. It made sense to ask her about his business. At the entryway to the house they were greeted by the young patient and her mother, as well as a woman somewhere past 40. Was that Hulan's mother? Maomao wondered. She had visited this house several times, but this was the first time she had seen her. Perhaps she was there waiting, not for Maomao and her band, but for Hulan. She thought she would call her Who's Mom for the time being. She didn't know if Hulan was even going to introduce them. But if he did, knowing how rarely she was likely to encounter this woman, Maomao didn't have much desire to remember her name. In the same way she dubbed Hulan's older sister Who's Sis. She did indeed resemble Who's Mom, as one might expect of a mother and daughter. But Who's Mom possessed a beauty of a kind that might make a person possessive. No doubt she had been a popular woman in her younger years. Mother, sister, Hulan said, bowing deeply to each of them. It has been much too long. Yes, too long indeed, Who's Mom said, and then she looked at Maomao and the others and slowly dipped her head. Her features resembled those of Who's Sis, but she had a retiring quality and a calmness in her eyes. Physically her eyes were more downton than her daughter S, but she exuded a unique loveliness. Hulan, I think that is enough of a greeting when we have visitors. She turned to Maomao and her group. You must accept my apologies for my son's thoughtlessness. Apparently this is where Hulan got her modesty. Her voice was as reserved as her appearance. Not at all, Maomao said, then glanced at the granddaughter. If I may, perhaps I could examine the patient's scar now. Yes, please do take good care of Xirohong. The girl gave her best bow. Xirohong Little Red was presumably a pet name, but Maomao had never heard her actual name. She looked quite different now from how she had before. Her hair, once dark, was now mostly light and evenly trimmed. The roots were a light brown that almost looked golden, while the ends were still black. This gave the impression of a brush that had been dipped in ink. All right, I'll see you later, said Hulan. He and his mother would hold their own conference while Maomao did her exam. Maomao and the others entered the room where she always did her exams. Well, maybe exam was a strong word. Mostly she just inspected the scar, then applied some salve. She hoped that it wouldn't be too visible in the long run. There were no servants in the house. The scar on her abdomen might not have been very obvious, but the family didn't want it to be public knowledge that the girl had had surgery. If the scar vanished more or less entirely by the time she was grown up, that would be the best outcome. I'm finished for today. If you find you need more salve, please don't hesitate to come to the medical office and I'll prepare some. but common items from the market would be fine too. Thank you so much, Hu's sis said, bowing deeply. Although it wasn't really that kind of visit, she had set out tea and snacks on a table. Chu's eyes gleamed as if to say, let's have a bite before we go home. Hulan isn't back yet anyway. Why don't we take it easy? I don't think there's any special need for us to wait for Master Hulan to leave, Maomao said. Were they a bunch of adolescent girls who had to do everything as a group? They had Lehaku there as a bodyguard, so it would be fine. Miss Maomao, are you telling poor, starving Miss Chu to walk right past these beautiful, delicious-looking treats and not eat them? Go ahead and eat them, Miss Chu. Woohoo, I knew you were one of the good ones, Miss Maomao. I could kiss you. She came at Maomao with her lips puckered, but Maomao shoved her away. Oh, don't be like that, Chu said. Aha, Maomao said, and set a glass of milk tea in front of Chu. Chu quickly mixed in some honey and stuffed a baked treat into her face. It was a cookie with dried grapes and walnuts worked into it. It smelled richly of butter. Maybe there was wheat germ in there, because the color was pale, but it would be very nutritious. It was certainly enough to pass for a luxurious indulgence with ingredients so hard to come by. Maomao nibbled on one of the cookies herself. As for Lehaku, he had his guard duties to think of. He only stared intently at the sumptuous-looking treats. Yes, he was doing his job, but Maomao still felt a little bad for him. Ahem, excuse me, Maomao said to Hu's sis. Yes, what is it? Would it be possible to take a few of these cookies back with us? It was a souvenir for the quack doctor. Maomao worried that maybe she was out of line, but Hu's sis smiled faintly and nodded. She no longer seemed on edge the way she had when they first met. In fact, she seemed very collected. Very well, she said. I'll get some for you right away. Just as she was about to leave the room, Zyrohong tugged on her sleeve. I can get them. Zyrohong went out looking happy. She, like her mother, seemed to be feeling much better than before. Chu watched the mother and child with a smile as she munched on her snack. Maybe she was silently willing them to bring back lots and lots of goodies for them. I gather the lady of the house is staying with you, Maomao said. If there had been nothing to talk about, she would have stayed silent. But since she had a subject she could bring up, she did. Hu's sis had been kind enough to give them these treats. Maomao wanted to repay her by trying to be at least somewhat sociable. Yes, that's true. She feels there's rather too much commotion at the main house, so she lives here instead, although she's also worried about Zyrohong. This was Hu's sis's own mother they were talking about, yet somehow she didn't look entirely happy. Maybe the two of them don't get along. Maomao wondered, and that was when they heard the eek from outside. Hu's sis jumped up and rushed out of the room. Maomao and the others followed close behind. The shout had come from Zyrohong, who was in the garden of the mansion. Someone was pulling on her hair, namely that obnoxious brat. The little monster, Jayuku whatever it was pulling Zyrohong's hair. His minder was nearby, but she only looked on apprehensively. She gave no sign of trying to stop him. Jayuku-jun. What in the world are you doing? Hu's sis ran over to separate Zyrohong and the little monster, or Jayuku-jun. She stood protectively in front of her daughter and glared at her nephew. Jayuku-jun tossed aside a few stray strands of Zyrohong's hair that had gotten wrapped around his fingers. What was I doing? I was just trying to help her get rid of that filthy hair. He didn't sound like he felt the least bit guilty. In his left hand he held a mud ball that he was preparing to smash into Zyrohong's hair. It is not filthy, Zyrohong sniffled. Hu's sis looked somewhat uncomfortable, even though she was defending her own daughter. Zyrohong is not filthy, she said. She's your cousin, but her hair looks like an outlander's hair. That's just how it happens to look. There are lots of people in the western capital with light hair, you know that. Hu's sis was acting very calm with her not even 10-year-old nephew, but it was obvious she was working hard to control herself. But auntie, you used to throw stones at outlanders when you saw them. My father told me so. Jayuku-jun was scowling. Zyrohong studied her mother's expression. Hu's sis looked even more uncomfortable than before. Ah, she remembered, Maomao realized. Jayuku-jun was doing things that Hu's sis had once done herself. You can't change the past, so it only makes you feel more and more guilty. No, Jayuku-jun had chosen that moment to let fly with his mud cake, but it never left his hand. All right, that's enough pranks. Chu had stopped his small fist cold. When did she? Chu had gotten behind Jayuku-jun in the blink of an eye. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Now. Water is a precious resource here. Just think how hard it would be to wash if someone got all messy with something like this. Chu smiled pleasantly as she crushed Jayuku-jun's hand, mud ball and all. It must have hurt because when she finally released him, his face twisted and he rubbed his hand. What do you think you're doing? Do you know who I am? Jayuku-jun demanded, tears threatening to form in his eyes. I certainly do. You're Master Jyakuen's great-grandchild, Master Jyakuo's grandchild, Master Shikyo's eldest son, the Honorable Master Jyakujen. Well, if you know all that, then however, Chu continued, they say a woman's hair is her very life. I don't know if that's true exactly, but I can guarantee that acting this way won't make you popular with the ladies for 1 second. Chu looked at the hair-pulling victim, Xiaohong, who was hiding behind her mother with tears in her eyes and sniffling. Li Haku kept a respectful distance. As a bodyguard, he couldn't get too far from Maomao and the others, but he showed no sign of intervening. He seemed to think this was just a small disagreement between children. Maomao agreed with this assessment. Chu was handling the situation and she didn't want to join in and overwhelm one child. However, Jyakujen still didn't seem to have learned anything from this moment. Maomao's impression of him as a little beast only grew stronger. Fine, I don't care about her silly hair. Jyakujen continued, but did you know they were dyeing it all this time? That proves she's an outlander. She's an outlander changeling who is here to hurt our family. A changeling? Maomao tilted her head. She hadn't intended to interrupt the conversation, but the word was so unfamiliar that she spoke before she could stop herself. A changeling is a child born to fairies or similar creatures and then swapped with a human child, Chu explained helpfully. Just look at her, Jyakujen insisted. Both her parents have black hair, but hers is like that. Anyone can see there's something wrong with her. They say she's my cousin, but that's a lie, so a changeling is like a devil's child. The term referred to a child who didn't resemble her parents. As the expression suggested, it was considered an ill omen. In any case, Maomao felt obliged to correct something. 2 parents with black hair can still have a child with a different hair color, you know. It's like how some cats might be black and white while their siblings are striped, even if they come from the same litter. Maomao thought she was putting it in a way a child could understand, but the little monster called Jyakujen wasn't even remotely listening. Maomao glared at the lady-in-waiting who was supposed to be watching him, willing her to do something, but the woman only looked away. He hasn't learned a thing since he injured the quack doctor. She thought a good whack would be the quickest way to administer a lesson, but when she glanced back again, she found Chu talking to the boy. Master Jyakujen, Chu said. Are you very important? She wore her usual indolent smile and clapped her hands a couple of times to brush the mud off them. You better believe I am, for I am Jyakujen. Yes, I know. So why are you important? Because I am the oldest son of the oldest son of this house. Someday I will lead the Western capital. So you are important because you are Master Shikyou's child. That's right. Jyakujen puffed out his chest. It was not unlike borrowing his father's authority. This was a major reason whose sis couldn't take a firmer hand with Jyakujen. Maomao glanced at Xiaohong's head as she clung to her mother. The woman must have heeded Maomao's warning to stop dyeing the girl's hair because there was a good stretch of light color there now. But there were specks of blood by the roots that must have been a pretty good pull. Maomao felt any possible sympathy for Jyakujen wither and die. All right, next question, Maomao said, taking over from Chu. Why is Master Shikyou important? Chu stepped back, allowing her to lead the conversation. That's because he's Grandpa's son. Oh, I see. Maomao's lips twisted. Even though Master Jyakuo is gone now, by this point she was grinning outright. It was not a very nice way to put the matter to a child. She was using words like a blade to tear him apart. Jyakujen's face went blank. Many people loved and admired him in the Western capital, regardless of what the central government thought. Speaking of his death here was perhaps not the smartest move. Maomao knew it was petty and mean, but she was determined not to feel any remorse. Xiaohong's mother couldn't say anything, so she would. Master Shikyou is still around, I guess, but I hear he lives quite at his leisure. Do you still believe he will ultimately lead the Western capital? Or are you saying you are the appropriate instrument to rule this place? Again, it was a harsh way to speak to a child not yet 10 years old, but she wanted him to understand. Are you yourself important? She asked. If no one ever disciplined an obnoxious brat like this his entire life, he would never grow up to become a decent politician. If he continued without learning, assuming his family name would secure his position like his father, he would eventually be disappointed. Jyakujen paled before her eyes. Perhaps he was beginning to understand in his own childish way. He might be descended from the son and grandson of the most powerful man in the Western capital, but even the most powerful protectors could die at any time. A child with no protector would end up as a puppet at best, or banished at worst. My dad would never die. Jyakujen exclaimed. Nobody knows when they are going to die, that is what it means to be human. Now, do you mind if I treat Lady Xiaohong's head? Maomao took Xiaohong by the hand, intending to lead her back to the room, but a clear, commanding voice said, "Wait just a minute." Maomao turned to find a middle-aged woman standing there whose mom, Grandma, Jiaoqujun cried and hugged his grandmother, clinging to her. Hulan was there too, just behind her.